A deer destroyed my wife's car and left us wagonless, and the clock was ticking for us to now find the best wagon in the United States for under $40,000. And that is what today's video is about. We're going to talk about which wagons we considered for our next car purchase, our test driving experience, and ultimately which wagon we purchased a few months ago. This is Cars of Medicine, where we talk about and review luxury cars, so if you guys are interested in that sort of content, please consider subscribing. This was the criteria for our next car purchase. It was clear from talking to my wife that she valued safety, reliability, and space for our next car. She really wanted something that had a lot of cargo space. Another wish list item was that she wanted a car that would be capable of off-roading and also performant when it comes to poor weather conditions. That was also of value to her. The last criteria and biggest barrier was that she wanted a wagon that came in at under $40,000, ideally something in the $30,000 to $35,000 range or less. And the rules were simple: no SUVs and no sedans. Our work was cut out for us, guys, because as you already know, in the US, we have a pretty much limited selection of wagons. So we needed to hit the drawing board, and we came up with some top contenders for our next wagon. Option number one was to simply buy another 2019 Volkswagen Golf Alltrack, the same one that got totaled. A real issue we were having was that the current Alltrack that she had was a manual transmission, and a lot of the Alltracks that were available were all automatic transmissions. Another issue is that she made this car purchase when car interest rates were pretty low, and she got a really good deal from her car, her initial purchase. We would be looking at competitive listings for Alltracks currently for sale. All of them basically had more miles or they cost more money. And it sort of felt like going backwards if you were going to get the same car but at worse terms and conditions. Option number two for our wagon search was to go upmarket. We considered getting an Audi A4 or an A6 Allroad. The A4 was very similar to her last car in terms of size, and the A6 would be an upgrade in terms of the engine, specs, and performance, also the space compared to her Alltrack. Advantage of going the Audi route was that I already owned an Audi, so we could use the same dealership, same mechanic, sort of already had 10 plus years of familiarity with the brand. Option number three, however, was something a bit different, and this was a dream car of hers. You see, my wife always liked the Volvo V90, and while the V90 was well out of the budget for us, Volvo fortunately made a smaller V60 Cross Country wagon, which would fit the bill perfectly. So that was a consideration for our next wagon. Option number four, which was heavily pushed by our family and friends, was to look at Subaru. So we did consider getting a Subaru Outback, but more specifically, my wife had her heart set on that Wilderness edition, the one with the extra off-roading capabilities and a bit more of a premium Subaru experience. Option number five was to stick with Volkswagen, however, get a Volkswagen GTI. We had some doubts about the downgrade in space, but one advantage of going with the GTI would be that she had the option of really fun manual transmissions, which was something that was lacking from a lot of the other cars on this list. Option number six, which was a mild consideration, was to get an electric car, more specifically the Volkswagen ID4s. There was a lot of good press and news about them, and it was just a consideration for us to go try and test drive and see how that would fit, even though it's not a wagon. Other ancillary ideas from me included the Lexus or a Corolla hatchback. However, both of these were no-goes due to the size and being small. I did also suggest having her look at the Mazda CX-50 or the Audi SQ5. However, those two ideas were axed because she didn't want an SUV. The Mercedes-Benz E-Class wagon, which is oftentimes regarded as one of the best luxury wagons that you can own, was too expensive for our budget and not really keen to off-roading. This idea was foo-fooed. So here were all the contenders on our list. We then began the next phase, which was to research all of these cars and go test drive all of these cars to see which one suited us the most. And before I tell you guys my favorite car on this list, if you could please just take a quick second and hit that like button down below. Really helps the channel out so much. It really helps us get seen by more people on YouTube. Thank you. Secretly, I thought that the A6 Allroad would be the best car for us. We're future-proofing it a little bit because it has all of that extra space. It also had an upgraded engine. You could go get a V6 engine with 300 plus horsepower in it. I just thought that it would be a good, nice ride for our next car. But one of the problems was the price. You know, brand new, these things are $70,000 or $80,000. And unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of availability for us in our area. We did find some examples, but a lot of them fell outside of our budget. On October 19th, my wife began consuming YouTube videos and getting an impression on forums about all of the cars we were considering before we would go test drive them. That's when she shared this A4 Allroad video with the text caption saying, quote, "I'm listening," only for all of that to get thrown out the window 2 days later when she texted me in a state of delirium that this 1983 Land Rover would be her next car. November 6th finally came around, and that was our big day to go test drive all of these vehicles. We started the day at a Volvo dealership nearby to test drive a 2023 Volvo V60 Cross Country. I will admit I was impressed. I was impressed with how the car looked, and it drove nicely. It drove very nicely. It felt like a really good luxury car. The vehicle felt spacious, and those seats were very comfortable in the front seat. Threw down the back seats and just got a little impression of the trunk. Not a fan of the infotainment system, but those were some small digs on an otherwise excellent car. Our next spot was going to the Volkswagen dealership. We decided that we wanted to test drive one of the manual GTIs, a 2024 GTI with some really fun roads that my wife could go test it on, and she was giggling the entire time. We had a lot of fun with the car. The car looked sleek and beautiful. I mean, Volkswagen does a really great job. And I think overall the Golf would have been our top choice if it wasn't for the space. If we were going for that practicality aspect, the Golf GTI did not have much. Our salesman Jordan was awesome, and he actually had a lot of mutual friends. We had a lot of mutual friends in town, and he was just very knowledgeable about all of the cars, and it was really cool to check out those 2024 Golf GTIs. If you guys get a chance to drive one, you should go take that opportunity. Up next was Subaru, right down the road, to go see that Subaru Outback Wilderness Edition SUV, more or less, and really determine if it was right for us, because I think the Subaru was in high contention up until the dealership experience. Our sales experience at Subaru was horrible. Our saleswoman, who seemed very new, made us basically wander around this huge lot looking for one or two cars that we were interested in, and it wasted a lot of our time. She also made a lot of desperate offhand comments, like right when we were meeting her and she was getting our information. She was making jokes about how she lived in town and she just bought a new house and that she really needed us to buy this car so that she could pay her mortgage. Down to the fact that when her sales manager came in to, introduce himself and tell us that they were willing to work with us at any price and they really wanted to make a deal, and they had a lot of volume. He shook my hand, but he didn't shake my wife's hand, and the car was for my wife, so it was a little disrespectful. The Subaru Outback itself was the most practical vehicle on our list, and it had the best off-roading capabilities. The interior, of course, was not as nice as a luxury car, but it was practical for off-roading and everyday use. We weren't hiking, camping, and doing all these off-road trails, nowadays as much as we used to be doing. So the off-roading capabilities was certainly on our wish list, but it wasn't necessary. It seemed a little silly to go buy a vehicle that is purely off-road focused when the majority of the use case would be on paved roads. And that off-roading capability was also a downside because it's elevated about 9 or 10 inches off of the ground. Great for off-roading, but then my wife thought about the fact that she would have to be lifting our dog into the car, putting objects in and out of the car, which would add additional strain to her back. It wasn't really ideal for her. And lastly, we hated how it drove. The transmission sucked. Doesn't really help Subaru that the car before we test drove them was the very fun Golf GTI with a manual transmission. So it really sort of exposed the Subaru. The Subaru was axed. We ended our long day of test driving cars at our local Audi dealership. Martin was very welcoming, and he did show us one of the brand new 2024 Audi A4 Allroads. We weren't going to buy a brand new car, and we were clear about that from the start, but it was nice to have something to go test drive. Comparatively to the Volvo, the A4 Allroad's interior just felt a little more cramped. It was still a very comfortable car. My wife did make a comment that the interior of the A4 Allroad seemed a bit more busy than the Volvo, but the car drove really, really nicely. And the interior had a lot of nice amenities. It had nice leather and stitching. It had a good sound system. It had a heated steering wheel, ventilated seats, heated seats, plus we checked out the trunk, and it was a pretty good trunk. I mean, the car really reminded her of her last car, except a little more luxury. Ultimately, after test driving all of these vehicles, our selection came down to one of two wagons. it was between the Audi A4 Allroad and the Volvo V60 Cross Country. And since we came down to the two, we really wanted to spend a little bit more time with each of them. So we test drove each one again a second time, but more specifically with the specs and model year that we really were interested in. In the end, we decided to go with an Audi A4 Allroad, and that won our competition of the best wagon in the United States for under $40,000. Shout out to the team down there at Annapolis Audi, and more specifically our car salesman Eric. It seemed like the Audi was the better driver's car, and I really preferred how it drove. I enjoyed the fit and finish, the interior for the Audi rather than the Volvo. I was not a fan of the Volvo infotainment, and I really felt more comfortable and more at home in that Audi driver's seat. I felt like me going from my S5 to that all-road was a very similar experience. Plus, guys, I was really close to what was really important, having an 8-ring household. Women lust over 1 ring, but guys really want 4, 8, or 12 rings. That's what gets us up in the morning. Conversely, the Volvo looked great and the seats were really comfortable, like really comfortable, and you felt like you had space. I was at Zen in the Volvo. It was a nice car. The thing was, the Audi was comfortable too, so I didn't really feel like going from the Volvo to the Audi or the Audi to the Volvo. I didn't really feel like one necessarily was way more comfortable than the other. I thought that we could do long car rides in both, so that seemed to be less of a factor for us. Ultimately, I'm not driving this car every day. I really needed to see what my wife was thinking. She said the reason she chose the A4 Allroad, she felt the Volvo could have more reliability issues down the line than the Audi, and she felt like the quality of Volvo overall has diminished since being bought by a Chinese company. 2 is she didn't really like the interior and lack of the buttons in the Volvo V60 compared to the Audi A4 Allroad. And lastly, she was not a fan of the trunk space in the Volvo V60 Cross Country. And that wraps up our journey on finding the best wagon in the US for under $40,000. And I think overall we made a great decision. But I want to hear from you guys. If you are in our shoes, which wagon would you have picked? Drop a comment down below and let me know. If you guys really enjoyed this video, please hit that like button down below. Also, please consider subscribing. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers on my channel. I just do luxury car talk, luxury car reviews. So I appreciate you guys coming along for the journey. Stay safe out there. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye. And even though we were going to pick up this one car, I still had to shoot my shot, gents. Link to Porsche 911. Since we'll be in Maryland on Monday, we could pick up a little something something, a 2-for-1 special. John Dong. It's a joke, babe. It wasn't a joke.